Hello, I'm Dave Ingebretson, and along with LeRoy Hyatt, we'd like to welcome you to another edition of Fly Tying, The Angler's Art. This time we're going to tie something, we're going to start with something that is really near and dear to my heart because I've really gotten into fishing bluegills and sunfish, brim, the panfish, which is how my fly fishing career started more years ago than I care to remember.
I'm sure you did.
I fished these things for 2 years before, along with bass, before I ever got near a trout.
Before there was trout.
This is kind of going back to, well, almost. This is going back to my roots at any rate. And I just call this thing my little rubber leg spider. It uses very simple materials, it's quick and easy to tie, and it really catches panfish. Why don't you tell us what the materials are going to be?
Okay, we'll use a small, round foam rubber. This does come in several sizes and more colors than what you can have probably used. Then we'll use an orange flat rubber leg. Now this will come round. I'm sure that flat or round, either one could
flat
be
or round
used.
and any color combination.
And then we'll use a yellow tying thread to match the yellow body material.
Now, you know, we talk about it being available in different colors, and of course you don't even have to have the round foam. If you have other sources of foam, they can be rectangular pieces. It really makes no difference whatsoever. Sure. But you do want to make sure that you get the closed cell foam as opposed to the open cell foam, because the open cell foam soaks up water and will sink the fly.
Plus, when you put head cement on it, it'll dissolve.
Oh, yeah, it dissolves. So you want to make sure you've got the closed cell foam. You can usually tell the difference. Sure. The closed cell foam is much more firm and rigid. But you get that so it'll float the fly. Now, these are very good in black with white legs, black with black legs, yellow with black legs, orange with yellow legs.
Purple.
It doesn't really matter, the color. But black and yellow are two of my favorites.
Okay, well, I have a size 10 standard dry fly hook.
And this can be tied in 10s and 12s, or probably best for panfish.
And I'll go ahead and put it in the rear of the vise and mash the barb. And I'll get that fly set in the hook. Now I'm going to put just a very little thread dressing on this fly, right in the middle.
Because this is where we're going to bind down the foam, and we want a good underbody.
Down.
Now what I do, let me tell you how I put this on. A lot of people would start by clipping an inch or so of the material off, tying it to the hook, and then cutting it to length. But to keep from wasting material, I lay it in position with the front of the foam about by the front of the eye where it's going to be. Then I tie it on, and then I clip it off to the proper length, and I waste no material at all.
Well, when
and
you
it's
wrap,
easier to handle a big long piece than a little bitty piece.
And when you wrap that down, it stands that front piece up away from the eye.
And I'll clip it off, and you've wasted nothing, and now you've got the body tied on. Let's put some legs on and go fishing.
All right. It is a very simple pattern.
Yeah.
Now I have two rubber legs here. I'm going to tie them in one at a time, though, Dave. It seemed like I have better luck doing
I always
it
tie them
that
in
way.
one at a time. Yeah,
and I
just
don't
make
really
a couple of
care
turns.
at this point what the length is.
You can do it a couple of ways. Now I see you're tying it in one on each side, and then you'll tie in another pair. I sometimes tie them flat against the side, so I tie in the offside legs first and then the near side legs, and have two that way. So it can be done either way. The main thing is to get two legs out to each side, and you don't want to cut them too short. Even though the fly is small, we want these legs to be, at least 1.25 inches on both sides. We want them to sag down like this when it's tied on. We'll cut them to length afterwards after we tie them off. But we want that bug to sit on the water with those legs moving.
I'll bet that longer leg like that would kick.
Oh, absolutely.
Really well.
Well, the main thing is it twitches. When you twitch the fly, the legs move, and it looks like something alive. Don't stretch them now when you cut them, because they'll shrink up. So keep them loose. And that
may be a little long.
That might be a little bit long, but we can take a little off that. But it's better to be too long than too short, because if they're too short, they're just not going to move. That's fine. They could be a hair shorter, but about that length is just fine. You want them to wiggle. I guess maybe if that were me, I'd probably cut another 1/4 inch off, but it doesn't matter.
Well, seeing that I'll go ahead and cut them off.
Well, it is me, isn't it? I didn't think about that. It's almost there.
All right.
Now rotate that around so people can take a look at it.
There's a little rubber leg spider.
And, let's get a little darker background behind that, maybe, LeRoy. They can see it a little better. Rotate there. Look at that thing, and you better believe you put that out and just let it lay there. Just let it lay there. And big old bluegill come up and suck that in, and if it doesn't, you give it just a little movement. You don't jerk it around, But just a little movement in those legs, oh man.
Well, that's the entire fly. The recipe is just nothing more than round yellow rubber for the body and whatever color of rubber legs you want. In this case, they're orange.
Next, we're going to tie a nymph pattern called the halfback. And LeRoy, somebody told me this was named after you. Did you used to be a halfback?
No,
you did?
not
Oh, wait,
true.
oh no,
I
wait a minute. I had that wrong. A drawback, I think they said. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was totally wrong. Well, tell us about the halfback anyway.
All right. I originally found this pattern in Wyoming, and it does work very well wherever I've tried it. The hackle will be a brown, dark brown coachman type hackle. The body material will be tied with the eyed peacock, different herl from that. The tail and the wing case will be tied with Chinese pheasant tail, and we'll use the standard black thread. Now I have a 3X long hook in the vise. I have mashed the barb, and I will start the thread forward. Again, I always dress that hook shank, always.
You know, we might talk about putting the thread on the hook. I usually start putting it over the top and make a couple turns forward and then go backwards over it. Is that about what you do?
Yeah, lots of different ways. I'll put the tail on. Now I want to get a fairly long section here, even though the tail is going to be short. I like the coloration of it when it's a little bit longer like that. If I can get it all to stay together.
So you're going to tie a short tail with long color.
With long color.
All right, well, that makes sense to me.
Well, I just like the way the coloration is on that. I'll tie the tail in, soft loop, pull it down, and there's the tail. I may shorten that just a little bit. And I'll trim this off.
That's nice when you get that natural little flare to the tails, too.
Yes, really is. And then we'll take a section of the brown hackle.
Do you want that fairly long or fairly short?
The herl of the stem, the fibers?
Yeah, because this is a nymph.
It's a nymph, but there is a lot of hackle through it. It's just tied nymph style, but it does work very well as a nymph. Now I'll take a peacock herl section, and I'll take about 4 of these, maybe 5. These are pretty short.
These are a little thicker than some, anyway.
Yeah, they're awful short though, so I'm going to take a few more than normal.
Yeah.
And then I'll trim the tips, as I always do, tie it in, and run my thread back here to the back. Now it's all bound down. I'll go around. I'm going to go behind that palmer hackle I'm going to run through. I'm going to get rid of those butt sections, and then just go around the thread a few times. Now here I come forward.
I'm always curious. I got to ask this. Why do you cut those butts off? You don't use them and you're not anywhere near what you're doing, and why do you get rid of them?
Well, because when you wrap it on here, that long stem on those things will get tangled in the thread.
Okay. I knew there was a good reason.
So if you cut it off, you don't have that.
And you're right, that does happen to me sometimes.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
So if you cut that off, it won't happen like that. Now here we come forward with the palmer. Peacock herl is always a good body material. Anybody you talk to that ties or fishes.
Well, it's got iridescent color to it. It's got reflection, and of course, you know, the theory behind a lot of this sparkle in flies is we're trying to create the illusion of life where none exists. We're trying to create the illusion of translucency, but we're using basically opaque materials.
Yes.
So for this reason, we put things in there that reflect light, such as tinsels or flashy materials, and this reflected light gives the illusion of light passing through the fly, and we create the illusion of translucency using basically opaque materials.
And the natural peacock is very hard to beat for that. Now I'll cut a few sections off here for the wing case of the peacock, of the Chinese pheasant. I'm going to lay it back to the back. And I'm going to use those tip sections for the wing case. Again, I just really like that coloration. I'll take a little rubber-based cement and coat those. That way I know they're going to be bound down and stay there forever. go ahead and tie them on through.
Well, you know, we were talking about why the palmered hackle along the body, and many of the natural nymphs, probably most natural nymphs, have gills along the sides, and those gills move and flutter in the current as the nymph breathes. They pulsate.
Sure.
So I suspect that this palmer hackle, like it is, could well represent gills, especially if it'll trap some bubbles of air, and might look very realistic.
Well, I know the fly really works.
It'd be my guess that that's what that palmer is representing.
And you know, I've never tried this in a lake. I've always used it in streams. And I'm just sitting here thinking, I wonder why I have not done that.
Well, it should work.
I see no reason why it wouldn't.
It probably is. Well, I won't even say. I was going to say it's more probably more representative of stream-type mayflies.
Could be.
I won't say that.
Okay. Well,
that's one of those things that didn't go without saying that probably should have.
Okay, yeah. Now we'll put a little thorax on here. I went backwards slightly just to make sure I had everything covered. Now I'm up toward the eye. Got to loop. Don't crowd the head. You have to have room to finish that. Trim those off. Palmer the hackle.
You know, again, I worry about things like that. Why is it that things that people say, well, it goes without saying, but it never does?
Oh, yeah.
Things that go without saying never do.
Or he needs no introduction and always does.
I worry about things like that.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'll just take a couple more wraps and make sure that's all down. Now here comes the wing case.
You could cut those off, or just
could
fold
cut
them
them
forward?
off, or just fold it over it. Either way you want to go, it works both directions.
Now here again is another case. You could put antenna on that nymph
Sure
if you
could.
wanted to, by leaving two of those tail fibers, pheasant tail fibers, sticking out
Absolutely.
and cutting them the rest.
If I were going to do that, though, I would definitely leave this shorter. I would not tie it in as long.
You mean the pheasant tail?
The pheasant tail.
Well, you just clip the length after you.
Well, you
separate
could.
them
I
out,
don't like to clip the antenna. I'd much rather have it the natural shape.
Yeah. I just have trouble usually making it come out the right length.
Oh, okay.
It just depends.
Then we'll get rid of those. We'll build a little head here over those. And it is a super little fly. They also have a fly very similar to this called fullback, tied identical the same way, except the pheasant tail fibers are pulled all the way from the back all the way across to the front.
So you have sort of a shellback or a two-tone body.
Sure do.
In addition to the thorax, yeah.
And there's a halfback nymph, has the pheasant tail for the wing case and for the tail, has peacock for the body, and palmered brown hackle for the legs.
Now we're going to finish with the Brooks Stonefly. It was developed by Charlie Brooks, well-known western fly tyer. It's a giant nymph that in these dark colors, I'm sure he used it to represent the big salmon fly, the Pteronassus californica salmon fly. And it's a very good big fish fly, and that's what Charlie did, is he fished for big fish.
Short line.
He wanted to get his fly down deep in a hurry
Quick.
and fish through the holes where the big fish were. And he also had another philosophy of tying his big nymphs in the round. He didn't believe in having dark tops and light bellies or two-tone flies because the natural flies don't tumble in the water. They come down pretty well top up and bottom up, but you can't make your own natural fly do that. So his thinking was if you tied the artificial with a dark back and a light belly, for example, it would not look natural coming down.
Right.
So he tied them in the round, that is uniform in all directions, so no matter which way that fly is tumbling, it looks
right
the same.
Up. That's correct.
So this is a good example of the Charlie Brooks style of tying big nymphs. And tell us what you're going to use to do it.
Okay, we'll use two different hackles again. We'll use a grizzly hackle and a brown. The body material will be tied out of a very dark brown yarn. It's a real heavy yarn. The tail will be either dark brown or black goose biots. The gills on this fly will be white ostrich. We'll weight the fly. It will be ribbed with copper wire, and we'll use the standard 6/0 thread.
And again, we have people tuning in that haven't seen the show or might have missed it. when we said what biots was, and for those of you that know, you'll have to forgive me for repeating this, but I think it's important because people say, what's a biot? Well, the biot is the short, pointy fibers from the leading edge of the wing quill of, say, a duck or a goose.
That's right.
It's the bad side of the feather.
And they're almost always dyed. There are white ones, but the majority of them will be dyed or bleached.
Well, I guess they will.
Yeah.
Although we recently used white ones when we tied the Prince
Yes, we
Nymph,
did.
so who knows?
You know, I had the opportunity to meet Charlie Brooks one time.
Oh, I knew him very well.
He was
Real
quite
character.
a guy. Oh, character.
Funny story about Charlie, you know, in the last years his health wasn't too good. And I don't know, for people that read John Gierach's books, he's one of my favorite fishing writers, and you'll hear stories that John tells about a guy by the name of Coke Winter. Well, it's impossible to exaggerate a Coke Winter story. Anything you read about him is absolutely true. He's another good friend of mine. Well, one time, 3 of us were fishing with Coke Winter on the Henry's Fork, on the railroad ranch of the Henry's Fork. Charlie Brooks was in the hospital. And Coke says, well, let's go down to Ashland, just a few miles away, Ashton, Idaho. Let's go down to Ashland to visit Charlie in the hospital. So we did. The only thing is, we did not take off our waders. We didn't take off our fishing vests, any of our fishing clothes.
And you went in the hospital?
We walked into the hospital, 4 guys in waders, full fishing dress, and the nurse looked up, didn't even bat an eye. She just pointed and she said, that way, room 7 or whatever it was. And, of course, we walked in on Charlie, and he thought it was great, but the funny part of it was it didn't even faze the nurse, and we didn't even ask who we wanted to see. She said, that way. Well, what have you done here?
Well, what I've done is I went ahead and wrapped the lead wire on the hook over that thread base. I've coated the whole thing again now with a rubber-based glue, and I've wrapped the thread over it. I'm going to take a couple of these goose biots now for the tail. Pull 2 of them, separate them here, and get them cut off. And again, I tie them in one at a time. I want the natural curve going away from me again, and I'm going to stand it upright and tie it on the side of the hook. And then I'll do the same thing with the other one, if I can pick it up.
You know, I guess I ought to also say about Charlie, he did unfortunately pass away a few years ago, and they had a memorial service for him on the bank of the Madison River inside Yellowstone Park, on one of his favorite barn pools, they called it, the barn pool, and I stood with his wife, Gracie, and it was quite an emotional time, but lots and lots of fly fishing friends came to that memorial service. It was very appropriate, and I can't see this fly without thinking of that, because this is one of the pools where Charlie just loved to get that thing down and drift through the pool and catch some very, very big trout.
And he would catch big fish.
He would catch them, and that's what he'd go for. That's what he specialized in.
All right, I've got the tails tied on. Now I'll take this brown wool.
That is fat, shaggy
It's
stuff,
extremely fat.
Is that Angora?
It may be. I don't know either. In fact, Charlie told me where to go buy this.
Oh, yeah?
So I bought a handful
Well,
of
that's
it.
interesting, because lots of times he just told me where to go.
Well, I can understand that. Now I'll get a piece of this copper wire. This will become the rib. This is just wire that I've pulled out of electrical cord. You can buy it if you don't want to do that. You can buy it in lots of different fly shops all around the country.
I wanted to get some of that stuff a while back, and it sure made my wife mad, but I told her she didn't need that lamp anyway.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, right. Oh, Dave.
Wives aren't always understanding about these important matters.
Yeah, well, what can I say? All right, now, I'm going to cut this wire, but I'm going to go to the very back of those scissors and cut. You do not want to damage that front edge.
That's a good point. Good. No, not the point.
We'll damage the point of the hook, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to wrap this yarn up to the thorax area. I'm going to take one wrap behind that ribbing and then come forward. The fly will, or the body will be tapered.
Of course, people that have been watching the show before, they know that the reason you take that wind behind the rib is to keep the rib tight on the body to prevent it from slipping off the back of the hook.
That's right.
And it gives a nice effect, too, starting above the first section of body in a very natural way.
I'm going to go ahead and cut that yarn off. Sometimes I'll leave it there and you can get away with it, but that can also get you in trouble. Now I'm going to just run this copper wire forward. Gives it the segmented look.
And again, you can either counter wrap it or not, depending upon whether you find it sinking into the material.
Absolutely.
You want the rib to show, so if you find it disappearing into the material, just counter wrap it. That is, wrap the opposite direction from what you normally would.
I'll go ahead and break that wire off. Now I'm going to tie this yarn back in if I can find the piece I laid down. Then I'm going to tie in a piece of this white ostrich. And this is really too short of an ostrich to use. I hope I can get by with it.
You know, that's a very good use of materials, though, because these big stoneflies do have very fuzzy gills that look an awful lot like ostrich.
Very much.
And so it's certainly a good use of these materials. And when you're a fly tyer, you always want to do that. Put some thought into what the natural looks like so that you can select your materials so they're appropriate.
Sure. Now I tied in 2 ostrich hurls together just because they are so short. And then I'm going to tie a grizzly hackle in. And then I'm going to tie the brown hackle in. And I've already laid these out and sized them. Then I'm going to run my tying thread forward. Now here comes this brown yarn again. I'm going to go behind those 2 just to make sure I have all the holes covered. And it'll only take a couple of 3 wraps here to get back up to the front. And it does give it a natural taper then when you drop off of that lead wire. Now I'm going to wrap this ostrich forward. If I can get a hold of both pieces here. What this will represent, like we said, is the gill covers. And boy, does that really stand up
actually,
nice
the gills
against
themselves.
the gills, yes. Stand up against that dark yarn. Now, it will really look like, or you would maybe think, that we're going to cover those gills up when I wrap those other 2 hackles. But what I'm going to do is wrap directly behind each one of those wraps of the white ostrich.
Well, actually, the gills on the natural insect are pretty much on the bottom of the thorax anyway. They're not really spiraled around the thorax.
But again, when he ties it in the round,
that's exactly the point, that this thing is going to look the same whether it's right side up or upside down, and it'll be very realistic.
And now here comes the brown hackle forward. Again, you can see those white gills through there. We'll build a little head. I'll put a whip finish on it.
When you're done, why don't you just slowly rotate that?
I'll do that.
And let the viewers see that it is going to look pretty much the same, whichever
no matter which way you
look at it. And you will have the white gills on the bottom.
You can see the gills very easily.
And so even when that thing is tumbling down the stream, it'll look very, very natural.
Well, there's the Brook stonefly, brown goose biots or black goose biots for the tail, the brown wool body ribbed with gold, has the white ostrich gills, it has brown and grizzly hackle mixed.
Well, that's it for another show, LeRoy, and we did a variety of things. We tied my pet little rubber spider for panfish. And as I said, I've really gotten into that recently.
I haven't fished for them for a long time.
It came up and I just got into it, and I had a great time in my kick boat this summer doing that. We tied the Halfback Nymph, a good nymph anywhere in the country, I'm sure.
Will work anywhere.
And of course, what more can we say about Charlie Brook's Stonefly?
No matter
it's
which
a big
direction.
fish fly.
And this is really a small hook.
Well, it is, but I guess really that is a western fly, we'd have to say. I don't know of any stoneflies anywhere else that's
not that size.
Quite that large. But if you're going to come west, and you are probably coming west because you want to get some bigger than average trout, have a few of these Brook stoneflies with you and fish them through the deep holes. They're heavily weighted, they'll sink, and they'll get down. Well, thanks a lot for watching. I guess we had a lot of fun tonight.
Yes, we did.
And I hope you did too, and hope you learned something. Tie a few flies, and we'll see you again. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Good night.
Dave and LeRoy have produced a new 90-minute video on fly tying techniques. To order a copy, call the number on your screen. These tips are only $28.95 plus $3.95 shipping and handling. Please have your credit card ready and call 1-800-883-0124 to order fly tying techniques. You can also order the programs in this series. There are 3 programs on each 90-minute tape for $22.95 plus shipping and handling. Call 1-800-883-0124 and order your fly tying videos or the Techniques tape.